First of all, it's Adam Pelzman sitting next to me. He's our guest. We've been hanging out for about 6 years with regard to all three of his books. We started out on the Avid Reader, my radio show and podcast with Troika, his first book, which was excellent. And as I'll say later, he's a real genre-bending person. Second book was The Papaya King, which was reminiscent to me of one of my favorite books, Confederacy of Dunces. And then now we're talking about the book that Stan is holding up, which is The Boy and the Lake. And so housekeeping, yes, you are on a webinar. This is Wellington Square Bookshop. And over the years, over the past 10 years, I've interviewed, and Adam twice, this is 3 times, about 500 or 600 authors, from David Mitchell to Isabel Allende to Paul Harding, to lots of people that I never thought would be willing to talk to me. And especially now during COVID, since authors can't go out on tour, they really want to talk to me, which is great because I'm getting to speak to people that I never would be able to talk to otherwise. So anyway, so this will be recorded. We'll put it on YouTube. The podcast audio will be on Podomatic, Spotify, and other forums. But the easiest is if you just go to podcasts on iTunes, and you'll see all 500 of them back to 2010. And this will be the last one up. And you just go to podcasts on your iPhone or on your Mac. If you have an Android, I have no idea how to tell you how to do anything here tonight. But you can chat, you can ask questions, and we can do polling, but I have no idea why or what polling actually is. So yeah, anyway, so Wellington Square Bookshop. Adam has been really kind to our bookstore over the years. There's been articles in Publishers Weekly about how we've worked together to try to work with his career, and have been lucky enough to have his books in our store, usually before other people get them. And especially this is true with The Boy and the Lake. And also we have a lot of copies because I know there's going to be a great deal of demand, and they're all signed, thanks to Adam, and we'll be figuring out a way to do promotions for either a well-reduced price or for free, depending on how the meeting goes and who wants one and who participates and who asks in a chat or a question or answer, and then we can do it that way. Or afterwards, you can call us at 610-458-1142. Our website is wellingtonsquarebooks.com, or you can go info@wellingtonsquarebooks.com. And we will get back to you immediately regarding this or any other major purchases you would like to make. And so in any event, let's get started. And there's only one chat thing. Okay, everything is good. And so, okay, welcome, Adam. Thanks so much for doing this. It's great for us.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's good to see you.
In any event, as I said, genre bending, and it may not be a term that you like, but why don't you just give us an idea, a preface or a resume or a CV of your life and how you became an author, and the 3 books that the first 2 we'll be chatting a little bit about, but The Boy and the Lake is the one we're really going to be talking about.
Yeah, terrific. Well, thanks. So in terms of my writing, I started writing, I did a little bit when I was in high school, but I started writing short stories when I was in college. I didn't do anything with them. They were just, based on experiences that I was having at the time. They tended to be sort of character-driven, emotionally driven short stories. But I didn't really do much with them. I just put them in a drawer. But I'd had a desire to write a novel for many years. I went off to graduate school in Los Angeles, and I remember spending a lot of time when I wasn't studying law. I was working on a novel that was, in retrospect, terrible. I then moved back to New York after law school and wrote another novel, which was equally terrible. And this was sort of a pattern. Every couple of years, I would write another novel. And I think they were getting, over time, sort of sequentially better. The prose was improving, the structure was improving, the suspense was improving. but they still weren't, frankly, particularly good. But it was an avocation of mine. It was something that I did to relax. It was something that I did because it distracted me from stresses in life. It was just a process that I enjoyed. And then in 2012, I can't believe it's that long, actually, 2012, 2013, I wrote a book called Troika. And when I finished that one, I thought, okay, this is maybe one that has some potential to be published. And my good fortune was that there was a literary agent who lived in my building. She was actually in the apartment right above mine, and I could hear her walking around. I can hear her footsteps on my ceiling. And one day I accosted her in the elevator, and I shoved a manuscript into her hands, which, if you ever want to see a look of terror on someone's face, shove an unsolicited manuscript into the arms of a literary agent. They panic, and that's what happened. But then she read it, and she really liked it, and went out to the market with it, and we had the good fortune of it's being picked up by Penguin. An editor named Amy Einhorn purchased it, and she was terrific to work with, and really helped improve the book. And it came to market in May of 2014. So that was sort of my first experience with the publishing world and understanding how a book comes to be. And that was a book where the best way I can describe it is we got a very good reception from a lot of folks. The book got some really generous, gracious reviews, and it was translated into Italian. They changed the name of the book to essentially The Cuban Girl, but it was translated into Italian, and for a variety of reasons. And it's always difficult to tell exactly what happened. The book didn't get a lot of commercial traction. It came out, had a good reception, and for whatever reason, didn't go anywhere. So in terms of my writing career, I would say that was an exhilarating, brilliant experience in the sense that I had a book published, and then followed by a bit of, for lack of a better word, a little bit of disappointment. And then I decided to effectively create an imprint of my own called Jackson Heights Press. My family for many years lived in Jackson Heights, and it's in New York, and it's a neighborhood in Queens that is a great neighborhood. I love it. And so I named this imprint Jackson Heights Press. And last year in 2019, I published a book called The Papaya King, which is very different than Troika. I agree with you. There's some similarities in sort of tone to a Confederacy of Dunces. And then this year was The Boy in the Lake.
Yeah, and like I said, the first one is a love story with a twist, and it's about three people. And go back and you can pick it up at our bookstore, and if you can't pick it up anywhere else, you can get it on Amazon right now for sure. And then you may see it again in the coming year. And as far as Papaya King, we've gotten a lot of press with it. I was telling Adam yesterday, my daughter, who's 19, little tiny girl, she's a great salesperson, and she runs out with the book because she liked it, and she goes, "You have to buy this. You have to buy this." And she forces people to buy it, much like you accosted the agent. And they have that look of terror, but then, she's just, it's Annie. So in any event, I love The Papaya King. I read it like in one sitting, which is, I don't think anyone would not read it in one sitting. And The Boy in the Lake is a completely different kind of story. So that's why I was talking about the different genres.
Yeah, I think there are three totally different kinds of books. Troika is told from first-person perspective of two women, a young Cuban woman and then an American woman who lives in New York. And then there's a third-person element that describes a man in that book. It's a different kind of structure and a different kind of prose. Papaya King is completely different. I think if you were to read Troika and The Papaya King, it's tough to see that. I think that the same writer maybe wrote both of them. They're just completely different styles. And Boy in the Lake is probably a slightly more traditional kind of narrative and prose. So yeah, I'd agree. They're three very different kinds of books.
And normally, like right now, I would normally say, if I was Terry Gross, which I never ask questions that Terry Gross would ask, I would say, tell us a little bit about your book. But I think the easiest way for it to be accessible to the people that are here now is for you to introduce us by reading the first chapter, because the first chapter is relatively short, but it gives you a really good idea of what's going on. And without me screwing things up or spoiling it or faux pas, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. That's terrific. Thank you. And what I thought I'd do is in the front of the book, before you get to the first chapter, there's a poem which I absolutely love by Anthony Heck called Prospects. And to me, it's a beautiful poem, and I think it fits so perfectly with the tone and the plot and the themes of this book. And I was fortunate enough to get the rights to reproduce it in this book. So I'll read that poem quickly, and then I'll read the first chapter, and then we can take it from there. Prospects. We have set out from here for the sublime. Pastures of summer shade and mountain stream, I have no doubt we shall arrive on time. Is all the green of that enameled prime a snapshot recollection or a dream? We have set out from here for the sublime. Without provisions, without one thin dime, and yet for all our clumsiness, I deem it certain that we shall arrive on time. No guidebook tells you if you'll have to climb or swim. However foolish we may seem, we have set out from here for the sublime, and must get past the scene of an old crime before we falter and run out of steam, riddled by doubt that we'll arrive on time. Yet even in winter, a pale paradigm of birdsong utters its obsessive theme. We have set out from here for the sublime. I have no doubt we shall arrive on time. Anthony Heck, Prospect.
And it's really interesting, Adam, before you begin, is that one of the people who works in our shop, who's indispensable, Mike, was a English teacher for 30 years, and he taught Hecht, and
is that right?
He really that poem to his students, which was such a coincidence.
Yeah, that's great. It's a brilliant poem. I love it. Okay, chapter 1, June 1967. I can recall with near perfect clarity the moment I saw Helen Lowenthal's bloated body slide up through a carpet of emerald water lilies and bob on the water's surface like a ghostly musk turtle. In the seconds before her lifeless ascent, a constellation of fireflies, tiny flickering furnaces, danced and glowed in the early summer dusk. A white egret, all legs and neck, landed atop Split Rock and stood regal guard over the lake. A long-eared bat carved wicked arcs through the sky before devouring a plump imperial moth. From the direction of Second Beach, Nathan Gold's pontoon boat, the Ark, puttered along the shoreline with 4 prosperous couples, reveling in their evening cocktails. A symphony of big bands, laughter, and giddy howls poured off the boat and tumbled across the lake's still water. Nathan and his wife, Bee, a gregarious, stocky woman, called out to me as they passed, and I waved back with delight, wondering how 2 people could be so festive, so happy, so often. Bonnie Schwartz, my mother's friend, was also on the boat. She was considered by many to be the prettiest woman on the lake, as was her mother before her. I waved to her with the hope of some reciprocity, maybe a nod or a simple smile in my direction. But this auburn beauty, distracted by her empty martini glass, did not notice me, an omission that punished my fragile 16-year-old heart. I sat on the edge of the dock, my feet immersed in the water of our beloved New Jersey lake. As the Ark turned north toward the clubhouse, the boat's wake caused the pungent algal water to lap against my calves. I held a wooden fishing pole that Papa, my grandfather, had given me when I was 6. The hook baited with a throbbing night crawler, I watched as the red and white bobber teased me with a quick downward thrust, only to rise to the surface and drift with rippled ease. Clever fish, I thought. A few seconds before the swollen body emerged, I turned back to look at my grandparents' summer house. I could see Nana flitting about the screened-in porch, setting the table for yet another dinner party, while Papa probed the lawn for moles, angling empty glass bottles into their holes with the open ends facing downward. Makes a howling noise, Ben, he once told me as he guided a beer bottle into the earth. Drives them crazy, like psychological warfare. What I noticed first in the water before me was not a body, but a flutter in the lilies that I mistook for a jumping frog. It was only when the attenuated rays of the descending summer sun flashed off Helen's gold and diamond watch that I realized something terrible had occurred. I gasped and leapt to my feet. God, I mumbled and raised my right foot as if to take a step forward toward the body. Papa, I yelled, dropping the rod to the dock. Papa, come down. Despite his old age, my grandfather was a live and energetic man who, after numerous injuries and surgeries, had somehow managed to retain much of the athleticism of his youth. He was alarmed by the distress in my voice, for he threw a bottle to the ground and dashed down the slate path to the water's edge. I glanced up to my grandmother, who stood frozen on the porch, right hand on chest, her mouth open. There, I shouted to Papa and pointed to the blue-white body of his next-door neighbor. Helen Rosenthal, whose rare kindness had evoked in me the greatest loyalty, was dressed in a pink tennis skirt and matching top. Barefoot, she floated on her back, her face dappled with lake slime, her dyed blonde hair draped over a mat of lilies, her pale arms elevated above her head as if she were a surrendering soldier. I took another step closer toward the water. I found myself drawn to her body, drawn to its deadness, to its serene, haunted passage, as one is drawn to the very things, once beautiful, now rotten, that intrigue us, that repulse us with their incomprehensible transformation. Papa reached the dock and grabbed my arm. He stared at the body in silence, then, as if looking for a clue, scanned the shoreline and the lake's expanse. 100 feet from the dock, in a pool of quiet water, an elderly woman couple fished from an anchored motorboat. The ark continued its journey toward the clubhouse, a familiar Ella Fitzgerald melody drifting off the stern. A small sailboat floated in the windless dusk, and the white egret elevated from Split Rock, relinquishing its perch in search of food. Go inside and call the police, Papa cried. It's Helen, you know. He wiped the sweat from his face, then, panting, bent over at the waist. Helen, Lowenthal, he said through heavy breaths before stepping down, fully clothed into the shallow water. I watched as he struggled to traverse the muddy lake floor, the water rising from his knees to his waist to his chest. When he reached Helen, he touched a small bruise on her forehead. He then grasped her left hand and guided her belly up toward the shore, her body slicing through the water with ease and purpose. As I watched the scene unfold, I was immobilized by my first close contact with death. I stared at her corpse with a vast fear, with a revulsion that shamed me, and, I would later acknowledge, with something approximating wonderment. With great care, Papa placed his palm on the side of Helen's head, a tender movement that protected her from hitting a protruding rock. Now, just feet from the shore, the water knee-deep, he turned to me. Go, Ben, he demanded. Go now. Unable to divert my eyes from the scene before me, I moved slowly up the dock. I watched as Papa stepped up onto the shore, his legs heavy from the weight of his sodden pants. I watched as he lifted Helen, as he groaned in exertion, and then gently laid her down on the spongy moss. I took one last look at the woman. She wore the fancy watch her husband had given her for their 20th anniversary, and on her left hand was an engagement ring, the one with a diamond so large that some of the women from the bridge club had started a rumor that the stone was fake. I glanced at her toenails, painted cherry red, and at her slime-lacquered face. Go, Papa screamed, now with fury in his eyes. And then I ran into the house and into my grandmother's fleshy, perfumed embrace. I ran to a safe place.
The thing that's good for me about you reading that is that for a first chapter, it opens up so many questions. You know there's someone dead, there's someone, you can tell that it's someone everyone knew, and you have no idea why she's there, how she died, and the circumstances surrounding it. And that's why it's good for me to do, because it's not like I have to begin by saying what happened or who or what. The one thing, normally another NPR question would generally be, so is the book autobiographical? But in this case, I felt throughout the book that it was autobiographical of me. And as we were talking about last night, there's a section in the book where he's talking about a breakfast, and the breakfast is bagels and lox and cream cheese and sliced tomatoes and white fish and all kinds of things that I remember from every Sunday morning. Although we had Vita herring and sour cream. Oh, did you have that?
My grandmother had a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so we basically had the same type of meal. And I guess another thing we could talk about initially is the fact, the Jewishness of this book, which isn't necessarily integral to it, but flows through the entire book.
Yeah, I was trying to capture. I grew up in a Jewish family, a secular Jewish family, and we weren't particularly religious at all, but we were culturally Jewish, and I was trying to capture a certain point in time and a certain sense of the Jewish community in terms of how we interacted with each other and how we interacted with the rest of the world, and how we spent our time. And so there are a lot of sort of cultural references that I bring into the book that are reflective of that experience.
Yeah, and and it's like when you talked about the Papaya King, and what was it that Mimi liked last night that you said about it?
The Frankenstein. Yeah. So none of these characters in the book are characters in and of themselves, or are people in and of themselves that I know. But every one of the sort of characters and traits of these characters, or most of the characters and traits of characteristics and traits of these characters, are drawn from people I know. So I might have taken the way one person dressed and then added that to the way another person spoke, and then an occupation that another one had, and I sort of pushed them all together to create for each character what I described last night as a Jewish Frankenstein. So, so they were inspired by colorful people that I knew when I was a child, people in my grandparents' generation for the most part, many of whom were sort of larger than life for me.
And I can see from the chat that Barry must be one of them. Did you look at it?
I didn't see the chat. Let's see. Yeah, I'm having trouble. Let me see.
At the bottom, it's chat.
Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, hi, Barry. Yeah. So the question is, I think is sort of what is Red Meadow Lake, and is it sort of a real place? And I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I spent summers early in my life at a place called White Meadow Lake. The place in the book is called Red Meadow Lake. But White Meadow Lake is a place in Morris County in New Jersey. And it's a place that my great-grandparents moved to after World War II. And it was a time when there were a lot of restricted communities across the country, but in northern New Jersey, there were restricted communities where if you were a minority or if you were Jewish, you just simply couldn't buy a house. They wouldn't sell to you. There was one community called White Meadow Lake that sold to Jews, and my great-grandparents moved there, and they built a little cottage. My grandparents ended up moving there and building a house. My grandmother's twin sister had a home there as well. My parents, my father and my mother actually met there, and I think got married at the lake. So this is a place that I spent many summers. It was idyllic. It was beautiful. The memories were brilliant. And so this, even though it's a fictitious place, it's inspired in part by my experience at White Meadow.
So one of the things that comes out in the book is the tradition, and I'm trying to stay away from certain things because when it's, I don't want to call it a thriller or whatever mystery, but you want to stay away from anything that might be spicy. And it's hard for someone who's interviewing or moderating. But in any event, one of the things I can talk about is the Jewish custom, which you and I are both familiar with, of what happens in the family when there's kind of a crime that's committed by someone who's trusted, but that person whose the crime was committed against can't go to the police. Talk about that practice and what it's called.
Yeah, with the caveat that I'm no expert on Jewish theology or the Talmud. I'm far from it. There's this concept of the Moser, which is the informant, and I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, but and there's a sense that an observant Jew, a Jew who is loyal to his community, should never tell on another Jew, right? They should, if another Jew does something immoral, illegal, improper, they shouldn't go to the authorities. They should resolve that within their community. Now, that was something that was not a concept that I was familiar with at all, because I came from a very secular background. But you see it now with in the ultra Orthodox community. This is becoming an issue, the Moser, the tattletale. And so in this particular book, there is an issue that arises in this community that is worthy of scorn, that is immoral. And the question is, should these members of this sort of insular Jewish community speak out and identify this wrongdoing, or should they remain quiet and protect the sort of integrity is probably the wrong word, but protect the cohesiveness of the community? And that's this tension that the narrator, Ben, is grappling with.
And another area that's it's accessible as far as this is concerned, so that someone who's reading it doesn't isn't informed. I hate, it's like, when M. Night Shyamalan came out with The Sixth Sense, which is his first and best movie. It was amazing to me that none of the reviewers gave away what happened. I was so awed by that, because I had no idea when I saw the movie,
Yeah, I'm worried about that, because there is quite a twist at the end, right? I think there's a bit of an unexpected sequence of events that occurs. And so far, the online reviews have been respectful of that, and no one's given that away. But I'm sure someone will at one point. But for now, people have.
Yeah, I hope they don't. But that's what you've said now is intriguing, and hopefully we're selling books. And that's, another area. Well, where I was going was another area is accessible. Is there's this character named Helen, who I found very, attractive in a lot of different ways. And I have the name right. Yeah, Helen. That's our not our protagonist, but our victim. Correct.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about in the book about her background and how she acted. There's Ben has a sister too, but talk a little bit about her proficiency, the skills she had, the confidence she had.
Sure. Well, Helen is the woman that Ben finds floating dead in the water at the start of the book, and by virtue of the fact that she dies in the first chapter, the first few lines, we don't have any direct interaction with her. But what we learn about her through the experiences and recollections of other people. And what we know about her is she was married to a very successful surgeon who was quite wealthy and popular in the community. She was a fantastic tennis player. She was the club champion year in and year out. She was pretty. She was kind. She had great artistic taste. Her home was decorated in a way that was very sort of sophisticated. She had these Bernice Abbott photographs on the wall. And she's the type of person that many times might be the subject of jealousy or some kind of scorn. But in this community, she was beloved. And Ben talks in particular about a recollection that he had when Helen was teaching his sister, who was facing some very serious adversity, teaching her how to play tennis, and how Helen was gracious and patient and loving towards his sister. And that memory of Helen taking the time to be caring and loving to his sister on the tennis court causes him to feel this incredible sense of affection and loyalty to her.
Yeah, and we really get into the mind of Ben, and all the characters are very well drawn. So you have a real I always think if you can remember the names of the characters, it's a good book. So Ben has an interesting relationship with his mother and father. His father's just a great guy. He's a great guy, maybe he's a little too timid at times. But his mother is a very complex character, and their relationship is somewhat complex. And at first, she seems like she's one way, but then she has other elements to it. So talk a little bit about her if you want to.
Yeah, she's a through the mother, I tried to capture a few different things. There are a number of themes in this book. One of them is this, especially in the years following World War II, that sort of commitment, that obsession with achieving the American dream, especially for communities like the Jewish community that might have been a bit ostracized, trying to integrate into the broader community and trying to have economic and professional success. And I was trying to capture the drive for that type of financial and social achievement. So there's an element to the mother where she's driven by that, more so than some other folks in her community. So that was one of the things she represented. The other thing that she represented was this concept of how do we, the sort of complexities of loving someone, right? Loving a parent, loving a child. How does that manifest in a relationship? And particularly as it relates to Ben's sister, we see that, I don't want to give anything away, but we see that tension, this great love for someone coupled with some motives that might not be so pure. So I was trying to capture a few things, this drive for status, as well as the complexities in any relationship, but also in a parent-child relationship.
So as we go along, remember to look down for the chat and also look down for the Q&A.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me do that.
Questions there from Dee Dee, and you've just answered the second one kind of, except for I like the part about the dynamic of the 60s. And what I was saying was, before I looked at this, was about capturing these characters, especially Ben, and his inner life and dialogue. So you can amplify on that. You've talked a lot about the marriage, but that part about the way things were in the 60s kind of intrigues me.
Yeah, so are you talking about the sort of historical context?
Well,
or the familial.
What do you think? Yeah, I mean, I can think of the 60s, and obviously I think of that the modern furniture, and I think of sitting around the kitchen table. Well, when I sat around the kitchen table with my father, it'd be me, Bob, Richard, my mom, Henrietta. And what would happen would be I could just look at Bob and make him laugh. And my goal was always, I could almost do it there, was to make milk come out of his nose. Yeah. And so I would, and then he'd laugh, and my father would kick him out of the table. Then I'd make Richard laugh, and he would have to leave. And then I would make my mom laugh, and she would have to leave. So it was just me and my dad sitting there, silent, next to each other. And for some reason, I thought, it was really cool. And that reminded me of the 60s too. So that kind of, you didn't have, people came down and everyone had dinner together.
Yeah.
It was a different world.
As I see a question here, I guess did you take people from your past family members to model your characters? As I mentioned earlier, I was grabbing characteristics and traits and wardrobes and personalities from dozens of people I've known over the years and just sort of mashed them together.
Remember, I think that you got a bunch of them listening to this too, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So as you went through this, was this something that was like born full blown, like Athena from Zeus's head, or did you know what the end would be? Did you know what the beginning would be? When did you think of the epigraph? Before, during, after? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I've been working on this book for years. I started writing it back in 2014, so it's been a 6-year process. And the sort of genesis the sort of driving force behind this book was actually quite a sad experience. So, as I mentioned, my family had lived in this lake community since the 1940s. My brother passed away 7 years ago. My younger brother, he had moved to the lake when his wife was pregnant, and they had their first child and then their second child when they lived at the lake. And he loved that community. And then he got sick, he got cancer, and he died. It was tragic. He had a little girl, they were 1 and 3 at the time. And it was, as you can imagine, absolutely the most devastating thing that could possibly happen to all of us, right? It was just a brutal loss. And, it's the sort of thing that you just don't recover from. And for me, what happened was it changed my experience with the lake. It went from being this sort of beautiful, idyllic relationship that I had with the lake, where I had only the most positive memories, to something that was defined, frankly, by the worst tragedy we could have imagined. And the result of his death, and he was actually at the lake when he passed away, was that it's permanently changed my view of that place, right? It's hard for me to go back to it and have the same kind of enjoyment or pleasure that I used to. It's just tainted. And so that was really the driving force behind this book. I wanted to explore this idea of what happens when something we love is effectively destroyed, right? Or overshadowed by tragedy. Can we remember the good? Does the bad overshadow it? Can they coexist, or is it changed forever? And so that's why you see some of the imagery that you see in this lake. Again, I don't want to give much away about it, but some of the things you see, especially towards the end of the book, are really symbolic of that rupture in my relationship with what was once a really positive association.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you go back to Troika, there's this Russian motif, including the title of the book and the concept of 3 horses that have to get along together to keep the carriage running appropriately. If one of them doesn't, it's going to go off the road. So there's that, and your heritage and what you studied, and that is in that book. That's part of you. And then in the Papaya King, it's your neighborhood, and you know every place that you're talking about through the entire book. It's like right where you live, which I'm not going to say where you live, and likewise here, you just demonstrated. And with the lake, there's like as you said, there's a transformative thing that happens in the book with the lake. And I can see what you're saying and how it's drawn from something, but you're able to metamorphosize that into a different thing that happens.
Yeah, I was trying to take those feelings of that loss and that change in my experience with the lake and magnify it into something else, right? So those feelings, the facts in the book don't mirror my own personal experience and the loss of my brother. But what I was trying to do is take those feelings of pain and loss and project them into this story in a different kind of way.
Well, there's also, it's interesting because it's like a portmanteau book. All of them are, because there's a kind of a love story in here too. But I don't want to say too much about it because I can say a lot about it. But why don't you talk about it then?
Yeah. So the narrator is named Ben, and he's really good friends with a girl named Missy Dopkin. Missy's in his class, and she is the smartest, hands down, the smartest person in the class. She's brilliant. She's hardworking. She wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning and does a paper route. She gets straight A's in school, and she is going off to university in Cambridge. She has a choice of the best schools to go to, and she goes overseas. She is principled to the point sometimes of being a little self-righteous. She's on the debate team and she's a state champion, and she's forced sometimes to challenge some of her own assumptions. She lives with her own element of pain because her father is a brilliant yet mercurial engineer who keeps getting fired from his job, and they're in a state of near constant economic insecurity. And Ben just has the sense he adores her, he loves her, he spends as much time as he can with her, but he has this sort of nagging sense, this understanding that he's always lagging a few steps behind her. He's never going to be able to catch up with Missy. She's never going to love him the same way that he loves her, because frankly, she's out of his league. And so there's that sort of adolescent angst that he lives with throughout this book.
And I mean, she really is smart. And also, my daughter's a teacher, and her students were upset one time because someone had called them weirdos. And my daughter Katie said, "That's a compliment."
Yeah, yeah. She's very funny with him. She insults him in that loving way that the people who really know us and care about us can do. So there's a lot of that kind of playful banter between the two of them.
Yeah, I would like, and it's funny. Another way you can tell when a book is good is if and I'm not going to give anything away, is if I feel one way about what should happen, and it doesn't happen the way with regard to he and Missy, it doesn't happen exactly the way I would like it to happen. But it's good because then the reader goes away having his own. It's like you carry the book with you, and you're thinking, well, what if they had, what if it had gone this way, and why didn't he, that kind of thing.
Yeah. There are a few clumsy adolescent moments where he probably says some things and does some things that he regrets, and so yeah, there's some uncomfortable stuff in their relationship, but they adore each other.
It's funny doing it this way. It's like if you're a stand-up comic in a sensory deprivation chamber. So I don't know if anyone out there is liking what we're saying.
Yeah, I have no idea. This could be an absolute disaster, Sam. We have no idea. I'm trying to see open questions. Oh, I guess I should just.
Oh yeah,
that's great. Someone says it's great. So thank you.
So do you know Dee Dee? Is that someone you know?
I do. Yes, I do know Dee Dee. I think that if this was a disaster, I would trust you would write disaster. So I think we're in good shape for the moment. Let me see your chat.
Yeah, you gotta look at these.
I'm trying to do this. I'm not very adept at this.
This is the first one, because you're
the first one. Oh, here we go. Okay, so answer live, done. Grab me 1 second. I'm just.
And I'm trying to figure out how to chat with just. Oh yeah, okay. From Marlene and Stephanie to all panelists. So if someone wants you to talk a little bit more about, well, you did a little, well, you have, but I guess they want you to amplify on the relationship between Ben's parents, because they just said it just now. But I don't know what you can say, or if you want to.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say without giving too much away. They're both complex people. They are there's good and bad in each of them. They are they're I think nuanced characters where you sometimes cringe at what they do, and sometimes you hate what they do, and sometimes you want them to be either stronger or more loving. But to me, they're full characters, and I also think it speaks to this question of why do people stay together? What are the reasons why two people who might have an imperfect relationship might choose to continue to be with each other? And some of it is a reflection of the times. Certainly divorce was not as common in the late 1960s as it is now. Some of it times it's a reflection of children or comfort or fear or any number of things. But these two people have stayed together, even though someone looking at it in this day and age might wonder why that's the case.
Yeah, and that's another one where I'm just looking at the book. I'm looking down at the book now. I'm not ignoring anyone. So that's another one where the reader is kind of like, well, I was anyway. I was going, why is this laid off on Ben? Why doesn't his father just, and you see it, you see it in lots of movies or TV shows or sitcoms where one person has the upper hand, but the other person is kind and doesn't want to be mean. Like that scene where he winks at Ben, saying, I know, we both know that she's acting this way. And my point is that the reader's thinking, okay, why don't you go ahead and tell her what you really think? And I think that's a compliment to you. I mean, I think it's like saying, okay, you can read it and be immersed in it, but here you're reading it, being immersed in it, and also kind of like also being a part of it. Not like breaking down the fourth wall or anything like that, but you're giving the reader things that, and I am, even now, having read it like last week, I'm still thinking about, if that had been me, I would have done that. And then I go, would I have had the courage to do that? Are those things that you kind of think about, or?
Yeah, you think about there's what we think we would do in a certain set of circumstances, and then there's what we really do, right? I can't tell you how many times I watch a film or read a book or observe people in my life, and I say I would do it differently. And there's a certain amount of judgment and arrogance that goes with that kind of view. But the reality is, it's much more sort of subtle and imperfect than that. And there's lots of times where we don't speak up. Maybe we're afraid, or maybe we're trying to observe some type of family hierarchy or professional hierarchy. And so we don't take the kind of action that we would expect in others. So yeah, there was a lot of restraint in this book among different characters. And like I said, part of it is the times, and part of it is that particular culture, that Jewish community in the 1960s. And part of it was personal failures on the part of different characters. So there's all sorts of reasons why people aren't doing what we think they should do.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like trying to tell some guy he shouldn't get married to this girl, and you can't do it. I had one friend who was getting married to someone he definitely shouldn't have gotten married to. And while he was walking down the aisle, his best friend grabbed the sleeve of his coat and said, "Don't do this." But it wasn't enough. And then he went through 10 years of hell. And that's human nature, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you look at this book as like, yeah, I don't want to give anything away. Let me see how I can phrase this. I can't.
While you're thinking of that, I'm gonna look at these questions here and see if I can figure out how to do this. Yanni, you asked, can you see us? The answer is no. I can only see Sam and a skeleton. I'm holding my book. So.
Oh yeah, the dread of winter coming and everyone leaving. I know that feeling. Yeah, because I said it's so much autobiographical to me because we went up to the Poconos, and that's where I went to summer camp, Camp Akiba, which was owned by Lou what was his name? There was a newscaster who was his daughter. But anyway, yeah, there was Camp Akiba, Camp Canadensis, and different layers of bunks. And
it would have been like the Camp Moskowitz or something like that.
Exactly. And it was you had color war, and we had a big lake, and you had for lunch every day, all 8 weeks, you had blintzes. And I was so sick of blintzes at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this really struck home with me. And that's one of the reasons I liked it so much. And if you go back to the Papaya King, no, I'm not from the Upper West Side, and I don't see those places. But when I go to New York, or I get a hot dog off of a cart, just like the hot dog cart in Confederacy of Dunces, it just resonates. Those kinds of things resonate.
Yeah.
But you never got back to like, I don't know where we got off on, but you never got back to like the thought process and what came in what order, unless I missed it, and what came in what order?
Yeah, so the book was, the first version of the book was very different than this one. It was, this book came in, I think, around 74,000 words, I think is the number. But at one point it was as high as, I think, 89 or 90,000 words. So it was another 60, 70, 80 pages longer than it is right now. And it was a very different plot. The things that happen in this book at the end, and the sort of, I hope, surprising twist that occurs at the end, that wasn't in the original version of this book. And so this was a really long process of continuing to go back to this book, thinking about what worked, trying to get it published, getting rejected, getting different kinds of criticism back from different people. And then over a long period of time, I cut out, like I said, 15,000 words, which is a really hard thing to do. Like, because you spent a lot of time writing that, you feel really strongly about what you wrote, and then to just press the delete button is sort of agonizing. I forget who it was. I think it was like Isaac Bashevis Singer said, and I'm paraphrasing, said something to the effect of like, a writer's best friend is the wastebasket, because if you can just throw out what you've written, it can create a path towards something better. And so I went through that process over a long period of time. And I will say it was not a pleasant experience, like to write this book. It's not like it was fun. It was a long, grueling kind of exercise, but it wasn't enjoyable to write it, but it was satisfying. It was satisfying because I was able to challenge my writing. I was able to throw out 15,000 words, and I was able to rebuild the book with a new plot, a new twist, a new motive, a new moral quandary among some really important characters. I was able to tighten up the book in ways that I wasn't able to before. So that early rejection of the book ended up creating, I think, a much better finished product. So, and I had the good fortune of working with a couple of very talented editors who helped me with the book. I didn't do it all alone. And they helped give me some guidance on ways to improve the book. And so where it came out, it finally, like, when I finally got it to this version, it was like something clicked into place, and I sort of exhaled, and I thought, okay, now it sort of works. So that was the process.
Yeah, I was listening to, my daughter gave me a subscription for Christmas. She gave me a subscription to one of those master classes on TV now, series. And so one of them is given by David Sedaris. And he's talking about how sometimes he'll write an essay and there's a really good laugh in there, but he doesn't want to lose the laugh. But when he writes the essay, he realizes the laugh has to go, but it's a laugh and he doesn't want it to go. And he says it's one of the hardest things is you have to get rid of the laugh. And I understand that, it's really funny, but nonetheless, it's no longer.
I got rid of a lot of good stuff. But the good thing is, I've got them saved somewhere, and I can pull them out and jam them into another book.
Yeah, do you see that question there, Yana?
So I see one from Barry. I did go to day camp there. I was in the, I guess it was the circus, which was the day camp for kids. My recollection is my father, when he was young, actually helped build the summer camp. He built some of the buildings there. Someone who went to a summer community in Wingdale says every summer the same people came back. Yeah, it was the same thing at White Meadow Lake. Every summer the same folks came back, and we were really excited to see them. Yana, yes, I'm hoping to use those in another book. Did you take writing classes in college or after college? I never have taken a writing class. I probably should. At one point, I'm sure I would get a lot out of it, and I'm sure I'd improve. But I just never had. I've never done it. In college, of course, I had to write a lot of essays. I was a Russian literature major, so I wrote about literature, but I never took a creative writing class.
So, Albert, you've raised your hand. I see. That's another thing you can see. He raised his hand, but now you don't see it anymore. So why don't you just type?
Yeah,
Or did he? Maybe he did. But anyway.
Yeah, so I see it. I'm sorry. So is this one? Do you still have fond memories of growing up there? Is that the question?
This is where I wish Angie was here, but she can talk. She can.
Albert.
So it says lower all hands.
Yeah. So Albert, the answer is I do have fond memories, I have a lot of amazing memories of there, and as I mentioned, tainted by the loss, but I do have fond memories of the lake.
Talk about the stratification of wealth, and especially since it's so Jewish, about the butcher and how he said, how they said about those hams, not hams, obviously, those roast beefs must be filled with gold or something like that.
Yeah. So in our Jewish community, there were, we were all sort of middle class, and aspiring to be higher than that. And but even within that band of middle class, you had these different strata. So you might have, in this case, it was Sid, the orthopedic surgeon, who had the Lincoln Continental, who was on staff at Mount Sinai, and he was quite successful. So you had professionals like that were held in very high esteem by the community because they'd accomplished a lot, both academically and professionally and financially. And then you had the folks who maybe weren't as educated, but were very successful financially nonetheless, right? So in this case, we have the butcher, who has several great butchers throughout Essex County, and he's very successful. And I think there's a snide comment in there when someone says that there must be a solid gold in those capons or something like that. So we looked up to the scrappier Jews who might not have been as educated, but found ways to be really successful in their own right. And so there were different levels of accomplishment, success in our community, like I'm sure there are in every group.
Yeah, I remember when I was in 7th grade, what really screwed up my life was I skipped a grade. So when everyone else was 13, I was 11, which meant that I couldn't have any girlfriends because 13 and 11 was a big difference back then. And so everyone picked on me, they ignored me. But every week, I was 11, but every week I was going to a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah every single week, the entire time. My high school was junior high school and high school was 80% Jewish. So I didn't know there were, and then I moved to Florida to become, when I first started my law practice, and that was the first time I ever encountered anti-Semitism. But be that as it may, this is where I go off. And most of those bar mitzvahs had capons, and some of the people don't even know what a capon is.
I think it's just a tiny chicken, right?
Yeah, but it's not. It's like a mule. It's not. I don't think it's able to sexually reproduce. I don't know. I don't
know about the reproductive.
I don't know.
Of the capon, but
I don't have time to look. Anyway, yeah. Capon and so did you have borscht? And what did you put in borscht? Different people, different stuff.
What did I put in borscht? I don't know. I think I've only had borscht a couple of times, right? It's beet soup with some type of.
But that's very Russian, because my whole family was from Belarus, and borscht is beet soup, but you're supposed to put sour cream and potato in it. And we also there was another one called prakus, which was meat wrapped in cabbage leaves. You probably had that, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that one I don't know.
And what's the other one? Oh yeah, we talked last night about fried matzah and matzah brie, whatever you want.
Yeah. Matzah brie and matzah balls, and
it's
funny. My wife is Indian, and so she has a spicier palate when it comes to food. And when we just met, we met back in 2015, 2016, and she never really had Jewish deli food before. And I took her to meet my family at the Second Avenue Deli here in New York, and she's used to her mother's spicy Punjabi food. And I take her to Second Avenue Deli, and everything is shades of gray. It's fried, it's salted, it's fatty, and I don't think she'd ever eaten food like this in her entire life. It was shocking to her, and I'm not sure in a particularly good way. So I've been developing a spicier palate over the last few years, and so yeah.
Yeah, I remember the delis here are like the Stage Deli in New York, and I love getting a corned beef special, which is corned beef, coleslaw, and Russian dressing. And the Stage Deli is like, it was so big you could eat it for an entire week. It was like
those are enormous, and I think I went there once, and they're 2 feet high and they cost $40, and
it was worth it though. It's difficult. So Angie, the manager of the bookstore, who basically does everything, and I go in once in a while. Angie's asking me, does a book stay with you? And I was going to ask too, Angie. Or when it's done, is it done? And again, does each book kind of lead to the other book in a way?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Well, it's like what Angie's asking is when you're done, it's like I always ask authors, it's like your firstborn child. When you throw the book out, when you let the book go out into the world, do you let go with it? It's done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty much done. So Troika came out a few years ago, and I have not read it since. I got a few copies on the bookshelf, but I haven't read it. Papaya King came out last year. I opened it the other day and just read 2 pages and put it down. And so my guess is this is the end of it for me for The Boy in the Lake. In terms of my reading it, I mean, they're important to me. They're important things that I've created, and the process stays with me. I learned something from each process that I went through, and I take those experiences with me in terms of the next book that I'm going to write. Each one of them continues to have an emotional importance to me. Troika has a lot of importance to me because it was the first time someone said, yes, you're a real writer. When one of the challenges of being a writer is you never feel like you're really a writer. You feel like you're a fraud. And my guess is that there are probably some very successful writers out there who sold hundreds of thousands of millions of books, who have glorious careers, who probably feel like frauds. And so I felt like I was a pretender for many years. So Troika was important to me because it was someone else saying, yeah, you can write. Papaya King was really important to me because it was, in some ways, I'm most proud of Papaya King because it's such an unusual book for me. And I was able to capture so many, for me, important themes and issues relating to what's going on in society and the dislocation that people feel in urban life, which is even greater now in light of the pandemic than even it used to be. And this one is important to me because it was a testament to, it was the result of a lot of really hard work and challenging myself to make the book better. So I take that with me from each experience.
Okay, we'll go.
That answers the question. Here's another question that was answered. A capon is a castrated cockerel that has been force-fed for better eating. So for those of you out there who are thinking of eating a capon, this should give you some pause in terms of the morality of it.
I don't see anybody answering that question. What am I?
I see right here. Sarah has written capon is a castrated cockerel.
But does it?
Force-fed for better eating. So I'm going to cross capons off of my list of dinner choices.
All right, going back to the book, and again, without giving anything away or talking about any people that he might have met after things happened, right. Talk a little bit about Helen's husband. You talked a little bit about the car he drives, but the kind of person he was, or may have been, or might be, if you can.
Yeah, so Sid is, he's a certain kind of character that was familiar to us when I was a kid. He was a very successful surgeon, brash, confident, impeccably tailored. He seemed to be a perfect husband. He was just sort of the ideal provider, husband, father. He drove flashy cars. He was just a certain kind of guy that everybody had their eye on. And then, you know, like most people like that, you scratch the surface and maybe there's something not quite as shiny underneath.
Yeah, he reminds me of a guy I knew, Tally. They call him Tally Talisman, and he always had the brand new Cadillac, and he'd take us for a ride in it. But no one really knew what he did. I don't know what he did. It was something fishy, but no one ever really said what it was.
Yeah.
And, he would drive like down just outside of Philadelphia. He would drive like at 80 or 90 miles an hour. It was a convertible, and we thought he was like the coolest guy in the world.
Yeah.
He was. Even when we had our Dodge Dart back in the 60s, there were three levels of Dodge Dart, and ours wasn't the highest level.
So there you go. So you were the low rent group with the
But my father didn't care, which was good. He didn't care.
Yeah, I didn't mean to insult you. I'm just saying that in terms of that stratification, that's how we think about that. Like, did we have the fanciest version of the car, or the second or third one? And I remember as a kid being very tuned into what kind of car we had and comparing it to other people's cars. So I see a question here from Mimi Libery. Can you describe your writing process? Do you write every day, a certain amount of words per day? The answer is I have no writing process. I basically wait until I'm really miserable, and then I write. When I'm happy, when I'm content, I don't pick up a pen. I don't write any words. And when I get anxious and stressed out or depressed or angry, that's when I write. That's the fuel for my creative process. So I might not write a word for months, and then write every day for 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, I might write half a novel and then might not touch it again for another 6 months. So I wish I had the discipline of other writers who, I'm amazed by that. They say, I sit down every morning at 9 a.m. I don't leave my seat until noon. I get up, I have lunch, and then I write from 2 to 5. And then I've written my 6 hours for the day, and I do that every day, Monday through Friday. I've never been able to do that. It's just driven by how unhappy I am, and the less happy I am, the more productive I am.
Yeah,
so that's the sad reality.
Yeah, and that David Sedaris thing again. He talks about how when he drank a lot, he used to write only at night, and then when he stopped drinking, he couldn't write at night. Yeah. So then he started writing in the morning, but then he thought he should be drinking. So it was difficult for him. Well, let's see, what are they asking? Okay, so Angie wants to know what your favorite novel is.
My favorite novel?
Yeah.
I don't think I have one favorite novel. I have many. I do love, there are a couple of Walker Percy books, The Last Gentleman and The Movie Goer, which I think are brilliant. I do love A Confederacy of Dunces. I love Carson McCullers, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. These are all just coincidental, I guess, all Southern writers. The Russian writers, I studied Russian literature, so the great Russian writers, Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment, those are brilliant ones. The Master and the Margarita is one of my all-time favorites by Bulgakov. So there's a lot of ones that I just think are incredible.
And if it wasn't for Walker Percy, we wouldn't even have Confederacy of Dunces.
That's right. That's right. I think my recollection is that his mother, John Kennedy Toole's mother, found the manuscript, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, after her son died, I believe it was a suicide, brought the manuscript to Walker Percy, who I think was a professor at a school down in New Orleans, maybe Tulane. And he read it and was amazed by it and helped it get published. And then it won, I believe it won the Pulitzer Prize posthumously. He won the Pulitzer Prize posthumously for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things like that, that you would never have seen the light of day except for her like carrying it everywhere. Just like with Kafka, you know, Max Brod promising he'd throw everything out, and then he didn't. He broke his promise, and then you think, well, he's a lousy guy. But if he didn't break his promise, we wouldn't have the trial or the castle or everything. So I always wonder about those things. You know, do you have a moral compass? Should he have done what he was asked, and then we wouldn't have it, or is it better that we have it? And now in today's cancel culture and the Me Too thing, you know, do you take Harvey Weinstein's movies and not see them, as a lot of my friends won't see them? They were great movies. They were great movies, and he was what he was. So do those movies go away?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. So a couple of years ago, there was an absolutely brilliant biography of Dostoevsky that was written over a long period of time by a professor, Frank, from Princeton, and it's the definitive biography of Dostoevsky. In its abridged form, I think it's 950 pages. In its unabridged form, I think it's 5 volumes and something like 2,000 pages. And there was a period of time where I was considering trying to option the rights to that biography so I could create either a film or a series about Dostoevsky. Because he led sort of a fascinating life. He was almost assassinated because he was involved in some sort of anti-czarist activity. He was actually up on in the town square, and they put a bag over his head, and they were about to shoot him, and then they dragged him out to Siberia. His father was killed by serfs. He had epilepsy. He had a gambling addiction. He was unfaithful to his wife. He was one of the most brilliant writers of all time. And so I was reading his biography, and I thought that might be an interesting kind of story to tell. And I got to the part where they talked about his anti-Semitism. And you're talking about somebody who lived in the 1800s. So anti-Semitism was the norm, right? It's just, there's nothing unusual about a lot of people being anti-Semitic in the 1800s in Tsarist Russia, right? That's just the norm. But his anti-Semitism and his xenophobia was so vitriolic and so extreme that even though it was common during that period of time, you couldn't judge him for that based upon where we are today. To me, it was so extreme that he became, even though he was a brilliant writer and one of my favorite writers, I didn't like him enough as a human being to tell a story. And I felt that if his anti-Semitism and his xenophobia was just sort of at the norm for that period of time, I could have accepted it in the historical context, but because it was so extreme, to me, it changed my view of the man, but not the writer.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I appreciate about what I consider to be the Jewish tradition and Jewish education is that there's this writer named Newt Hampson, and he wrote this book called Hunger and another one called Growth of the Soil. And they're both really, really good books. But he was like as anti-Semitic as possible and was a Nazi in World War II, but yet Jewish people read him assiduously. And I've read his books. They're great. They're incredibly great. And so I think in a cultural and intellectual sense, I think separating the two is much easier. And it sounds like I'm culturally appropriating something, but it just seems much easier for me. And because of our tradition to say, okay, this is a work of genius, I can disregard the other thing completely.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, right? How do you separate the writer from the work, or the artist from the art? And sometimes you can, if there's a disconnect between the beauty of the work and the lack of beauty of the creator of the work. Sometimes it's a manageable gap, and sometimes it's so great that it can be disqualifying, or it can change your view of it. So it's and that's changing in real time, right? We're seeing it in our culture change pretty dramatically. How people address that dichotomy.
Yeah, it's like my mixed feelings about tearing down statues of Confederate generals and people. But it's like, again, the cancel culture thing. There was a whipping post in Delaware somewhere. They just took down and put to a warehouse. They last used it in 1975, and mostly Black people were whipped there. And I'm thinking, no, you need to leave that up there because you need to remember what we did. It's more, and there's so many, another article today in the Times about 1984 and, you know, Newspeak and whether we're at war with Eurasia or Europa. And it's like, and because of technology, it's becoming so much more difficult because of deep fake and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like, yeah, we may have done some bad things, really bad things, but if we take down those monuments to the bad things, then we're going to lose the memory of it, whether it's the Holocaust or the Civil War, or wiping out Aborigine people, you know what I mean? Or changing the names of baseball teams even, you know? The Washington football team. I don't know.
I think, yeah, this is a you know, this is a very complex discussion. I'm glad they changed the name of that football.
Yeah, I am too. But then the Chiefs is okay and the Indians is okay so far, but the Redskins is pejorative. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I do this. This is what I do, Adam. You know, I just go off. It has nothing to do with the book, and we're not selling any books this way. But I guess another area that is interesting is, well, first of all, the Ark, and that's right in the first page or second page of the book. What is it, and who had it, and who are they?
I'm sorry, what is
the Ark, the big boat? Am I right?
Oh, the Ark. Yeah, this is there was a family at the lake, and I won't name their names. The lake that I grew up in, and they had this great pontoon boat, and they were always out there having cocktails and playing music, and they'd putter around the lake, and they'd stop at different people's docks around the perimeter of the lake at the shore, and they'd say hello, and they'd jump off onto the dock and have a drink, and so those are minor characters, but they were meant to capture this sort of joyful, sort of post-World War II spirit and energy of that sort of prosperous community. But yeah, that was sort of modeled after some folks that I remember at that time.
Yeah, I guess. Well, yeah. Was it the same hierarchy of boats as there were with cars and stuff?
No, there was no hierarchy of boats because it was a small lake, and everyone pretty much had the same boat, and there was a limit on the horsepower that you could have on your engine. So it's not like somebody could have a big boat with a huge engine and go faster than everyone else. I think everyone was capped at like five horsepower or 10 horsepower. So that was one area where there was sort of equality among people. Everybody had similar kinds of boats, as I recall.
Yeah, and the sailboats were all sunfish. I remember those too from camp. So, I think you did say when we were talking last night that you already are starting something. Well, you can talk about that if you want. What you're going to do?
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple of things. I'm working on a book that takes place in the first few weeks of the pandemic in New York. So it would be March or April of last year, and I'm describing those sort of first few really shocking weeks where we didn't know what was going on. And I live on Amsterdam Avenue and 79th Street, and every 10 seconds there was an ambulance shooting up Amsterdam to go up to Columbia Presbyterian, the hospital uptown. People were isolated in their apartments, coming out only at 7 o'clock at night to celebrate and honor the physicians and nurses and the first responders who were doing such heroic work. And so I'm working on that one, and on that one is going to have sort of an illustrated aspect. So I'm working with, I hope, a friend of mine who's a great painter. She did this tremendous painting back here. Her name is Charity Baker, and it's our hope that she's going to do the illustrations, and I'm going to do the words. So we're working on that. And then was able to sort of reacquire the rights to my first novel, Troika, from Penguin. And in the spring, I'm going to be coming out with sort of a reissue of that book with a new title, a new cover, and I'm excited about that as well.
Okay. Well, does anybody else have any questions or want to chat about anything? Because we've gone through the book. I think we've gone through the book pretty well, you know?
I think so. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff without giving too much away. So I think that was quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, I think you owe me on that one because, yeah, you do. It's hard to do that. But I always like to let the writer spoil it. Then I don't feel so bad. If I can lead the writer to spoil his own book, that's okay.
I didn't take the bait. So.
No, you didn't. Let's see. Oh, so Sarah, have you pursued making any of your books into a screenplay like this one? And I asked you last night about Netflix or something.
Yeah, there hasn't been, to be candid, there hasn't been enough. My books haven't been widely enough read, and they haven't had enough sort of commercial success that it's translated into that kind of opportunity. With that said, I think, I've always felt that Troika would have translated beautifully to a visual medium. But the answer is I've just focused on writing it. And if anybody ever had an interest in that, of course, I'd love to talk to them about it. But there hasn't been that kind of interest in my work so far.
Yeah, because of Netflix and Amazon and Apple Now and Hulu and all, I think Papaya King would make a great mini series because there's so many places you could stop.
Yep.
And then go to the next section.
And you could probably film the whole thing in a day. So.
Oh yeah, it would be great because you could just shoot it all exactly.
Right on the Upper West Side, 72nd Street.
Yeah, it would be like a demented Seinfeld or something.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anything else here? Let's see. Oh, okay, here's someone who says, looking good, Adam, just ordered your book. Oh, that was before the, now I see the Cape Con. Okay. And Angie's yelling at me for saying they should leave the Whipping Post up. All right, whatever. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and this is what Angie told me to do. So with regard to the books we have, we've got a bunch of them. So I forgot, or maybe she says I forgot. I didn't mention they were all signed. We have a big box of them. And you can obviously buy them. There's not any additional cost for them being autographed, signed on the frontispiece, the cover page. And the other way we can do it is after we get this all out on social media, which we're now really good at, again, because of Angie. If you watch our social media and you comment, then we'll come up with some kind of promotion where you can receive a complimentary signed copy. I would just say, if you say something really good about us or Adam somewhere, then we'll just send you money or something, something like that. But we'll just send you the book instead. It's easier for me. Okay, well, this was great. This is my first experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I didn't, usually I can empty a party out like in half an hour by just being so obnoxious.
You only lost a few people from the peak, Sam, so you did well. And I apologize, Sam and I can't see anyone. So we can't see your faces out there, but thanks so much for spending this time. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the work that Sam and Angie has done, and I appreciate the support. So thank you.
Okay, and again, anytime you want to come down, or next time I come up to New York, we got to get to. I wouldn't say go and have a drink at a bar, but we can't. But we can do something.
I'd love to come down to Exton, and what I'd say to everybody, I'm sure a lot of folks on here feel the same way. But independent bookstores, local bookstores, so important. Please support them and do what you can to help them through a difficult time.
Thanks, Adam. And, like I said, it's surprising, I'm not going to use all the cliches that everyone's using about the new normal and all that stuff, but we have found a lot of avenues, Ingram, as I told you, distributes drop ships for us. We don't make as much money, but there's no overhead. We're open 4 days a week now. We're going to move to a fifth, and we're doing just as well, if not better than we were before. Again, like you said, local community support. And other bookstores are having issues as well. But just like you, I mean, this is your passion, and me doing this kind of stuff and selling books is my passion as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're good. Thanks.
We're good. We're good. Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
See you
So.
later.